The morning coastal fog hugged the manicured lawns of the Montecito estate like a shroud as Prince Harry stepped out onto the rose-lined terrace, steaming cup of Earl Grey in hand. A new day in his carefully cultivated California idyll had dawned, one that should have carried the familiar comforts and contentments he'd grown accustomed to since his exodus from the archaic burdens of royal life. Yet on this particular morning, an ominous pall of disquiet suffused the air, casting Harry's palatial American refuge in a funereal miasma of funereal unease. As the distant calls of gulls mingled with the crashing cadence of waves against the shoreline, the Duke's eye was drawn to an innocuous sealed envelope lying upon the ornate patio table flanking his chaise lounge. A single name, etched in his wife's unmistakable calligraphic hand, endowed the unassuming parcel with a vaguely sepulchral portent that caused Harry's stomach to clench uneasily. Harry, the looping script beckoned, its very materiality seeming to radiate with implications he instinctively recoiled from confronting. For several suspended moments the Duke stood frozen in uneasy contemplation, his poise belying the steadily escalating litany of anxieties unfurling within his psyche. Could this unheralded correspondence portend the eruption of some fresh scandal or calumny? A rebuke from his own inner circle in the wake of his ceaseless truth bombshells lobbed in the direction of the royal establishment he had abandoned? Or perhaps most dreaded of all, a harbinger signaling the very fracturing of the defiant union with his wife that had precipitated this new chapter of splendid exile in the American idyll they had forged? Jaw clenched against a mounting torrent of murky apprehensions, Harry at last leaned forward and retrieved the unassuming envelope from its resting place, rife with an almost reverent solemnity. As his fingertips at last made contact with the cool paper surface, an imperceptible tremor rippled through the prince's tautly composed facade, betraying an instinctual revulsion to whatever revelations and ramifications lay in store. Retreating to his customary seat, Harry cradled the weighty parcel before slowly unsealing the envelope with a decisive tear. An exhalation of mingled resignation and escalating unease escaped his lips as he indulged in a final, sidelong glance outward across the breathtaking expanse of manicured flora and Pacific coastline before training his attentions fully upon the pages at hand. What the beleaguered Duke next bore witness to as he delved into the finely scripted manifesto before him would reverberate through his core in a harrowing shockwave of devastation, a searing, lacerating betrayal of such magnitude as to irrevocably eclipse all the wounds of abandonment and negation he had previously endured at the hands of the royal family. For contained within that envelope's confines was nothing less than a meticulously delineated litany of intent, his beloved Meghan's painstakingly composed farewell letter and announcement of her impending defection not merely from their union, but from Harry's very reality. "My dearest Harry," the densely inked sentences began with all the warmth and tenderness the Duchess could nominally muster before descending into the profound disavowals that would leave the prince's universe shattered in their wake. "By the time these words find your eyes, I will already have made arrangements to depart this place of refuge and solitude we had so painstakingly sought to construct together, and struck a course back towards the archaic constraints and repressions we had jointly sought to escape." For Harry, the serene quietude of his Ocean View sanctuary detonated into a maelstrom of inner turmoil and existential upheaval as each subsequent line etched itself into his consciousness with scorching permanence. Every cherished belief, hope and aspiration he had vested in the great transatlantic relocation that was intended to rewrite the dismal cycles of oppression and recrimination under Buckingham Palace's shadow now revealed itself as a hollow mockery. The American dream he had fought to seize for himself and his soulmate, a paradise of unshackled freedoms in their own monarchical dominion, was rapidly fracturing into a dystopian, Caligulan nightmare reflective of his worst imaginings. "You need no longer carry the burden of my quest for truth and self-actualization, for it has become resolutely apparent that the only path forward lies in my returning to the archaic conventions of Buckingham Palace and subjugating myself once again to their antiquated, retrograde demands." Myriad implications and sub-narratives materialized from between Meghan's purgative lines, phantasmic in their visceral lashing anguish. Had the Duchess' vaunted convictions finally crumbled under the corrosive weight of exile and deprivation? Or was this a unilateral sacrificial gambit, a ploy to rejoin the ranks of the firm under the auspices of hard-won agency and leverage to institute substantive internal reforms from within? Worse still, was this disavowal the culmination of an elaborate duplicity, a cataclysmic reversal of her anti-monarchist pronouncements that would see her willing allegiance return to the very institutionalized constructs she had so ardently vowed to dismantle? For Harry, any and all potentialities descended into an abyss of futile conjecture as his mind reeled in despair, struggling and utterly failing to formulate a coherent narrative, a psychic self-defense to stem his world from fragmenting into jagged entropy. Beads of cold perspiration dotted his brow as phrases and slivers of revelation penetrated with lacerating cruelty, their sibilant whispers of treason and allegiance cascading over him like rapiers of Arctic finality. It is a burden I can no longer ask you to share, nor even one I can permit myself to persist in any longer. The path ahead lies open only to my solitary passage. My stance of dissidence and combat against the crown must be shed, reshaped into a vanguard of reformation through reintegration if any meaningful evolution is to be achieved. Our union was never fated to persist in pure rebellion. Our roles, tragically, lie centered in opposing spheres of resolution. Each word detonated like an encroaching barrage in Harry's psyche, their cumulative impact cleaving away every bulwark of denial, every desperate refuge of avoidance he could formulate until at last, the full horror of Meghan's intent congealed with a finality no rationalization could forestall. I can only pray that one day you will forgive both my actions and this cruel subterfuge, and take solace that my defection carries the ultimate aim of exacting reforms and paradigm shifts from within the monarchy to better honor your own convictions, the Duchess' letter concluded in a discordant crescendo of emotional dissonance. I forever remain devoted to you in spirit even as the harsh realities of obligation demand I surrender my physical presence. May this savage gulf ultimately serve to catalyze the substantive evolution you have championed all along. The Duke's hands fell numbly from the damning pages, each careening groundward like a scrap of archival effluvia rent from some chronicle of existence no longer applicable in the aftermath of such a harrowing disavowal. As the full, visceral toll of Meghan's words congealed into the omnipresent obelisk of abandonment, every remaining pretense at regal poise and stoic composure detonated in parallel cataclysm. Where moments earlier had stood a duke exuding the vestiges of nobility and aristocratic self-command, now crumpled a pathetic, ruined shadow splintered beyond all recognition. Hot rivulets of shameful grief seared salty tracks down Harry's stricken features as he surrendered fully to the soul-rending gravity of his circumstance. Racked by escalating paroxysms of keening agony, hoarse, animal wails of repudiation at the very existence itself, the Duchess' forsaken consort surrendered his will to the demons howling at the abyss now coring his very essence. For what seemed an eternity but could have encompassed no more than a solitary instant, the once royal scion contorted in guttural, rending throes of terminal anguish upon the terracotta tiles of his luxuriant retreat. His fingers scored anguished furrows in